But okay, let me try to do this in a little bit neater of a bow. My thoughts on Resident Evil 4 remake. In short, this is how remakes need to be done. Similar to Dead Space remake, I thought this was immaculate. It kept the original intact and only added good things to it. They didn't the things that are missing, aside from maybe one boss fight that would have been interesting to see their take on this time around, the things that they're missing, I'm fine without. It's not even that big of a deal. However, there are two major omissions for the remake that I'm certain is going to be DLC in the future. However, it's not at launch, and that's bullshit. I'll get to that after this cutscene. I don't want to talk too much. Long story short, though, I do like the way they changed this cutscene as opposed to the original. Um,
I've obtained the amber.
I saw this a little before done. And right here, for the people that don't know, there's two major clues right here that kind of break my heart, but also get me sort of excited. A lot of people know Resident Evil 5 was or in a lot of people's opinion, is kind of where the series as a whole started taking a nosedive. Some would argue it was 4, but the majority start to argue that it's 5, and then general consensus that 6 never happened. But that aside, on the screen right now is a picture of, I forgot what her fucking name is, but she's basically the leader of, or one of the orchestrators of the pseudo umbrella company that Wesker's running in 5. I forgot what they're called, like Trey something. And then the picture to the right, the bigger picture, is actually the picture that you'll find in Resident Evil 5 of the cave where the plant is found. Tricell, yep. Excel, exactly. You got it. You already know. You already know. But for those that don't, this is more than likely a huge fucking clue that the next remake, and they did say they're sticking to number titles, is gonna be 5. And that sucks because I really think that not only would the series benefit, like profit wise, from them doing Code Veronica next, but I think the like general player base would benefit from it, because if you think about it, there's a huge, especially nowadays, a huge portion of their player base that's only played the remakes, and they've never touched Code Veronica. And there's an even bigger portion that have played both the old and new, but not Code Veronica, because Code Veronica, at least for like my age when I was into it, there wasn't like a lot of video game news, a lot of like advertisements for it back in the day. So, you know, not a ton of people played it. I mean, there's definitely a good amount of people that played it, don't get me wrong, but when you're looking at the entire, like, a pie chart, I want to say maybe 25%, 30% of the like whole player base played it to completion. Or yeah, played it to completion. I want to say maybe 45, 50% even know of its existence in the first place. And so you've got a huge opportunity to kind of bring the lore full circle, because if you're playing the remakes 2, 3, 4, there's a huge time gap between 2, 3, and 4, because I want to say 2 and 3, they literally are happening like at the same time. So I say 2 to 4 because it's following Leon's story. I just genuinely think for the lore overall, for the background, for like what's going on with Umbrella and all that stuff, it would just do wonders to put Veronica in on the remake list. Yep, the Flower Garden. I think they're trolling us. I think Code Veronica will be remade and bring the story together. I certainly hope so. I really hope so. I honestly hope both do. I really do, because if they remade 5, they can fix a lot. Because 5, from what I remember, it was kind of goofy, and it was a little like, I don't want to say all over the place, but like it was important because there was some really good stuff to it. But also a lot of the actual like story started to make sense only after the DLC was put to, or it came out. And to be perfectly honest, like I never played the DLC. I only played it at launch from beginning to end, and some of the mercenaries. I hardly touched it if I'm honest, but I I honestly think that they could do some really cool stuff with it if they brought it back to this level of detail, this level of quality, and gave it this amount of love. I think 5 might become a lot of people's new favorite Resident Evil, especially if they retooled the whole boulder punching thing into something more digestible. Yeah, Jill's laid up, gets in the hospital, and then during the time Claire and Leon roll in and go out, it was a little goofy, but still one of the best selling art. No, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, it was the most, at the time especially, it was the best selling Resident Evil title at launch ever. Sold something like 13 million copies. It was ridiculous. It sold so well. And it had some of the coolest monsters, like the alligators and stuff. Really, really cool. And then, spoilers, but you finally get to give Wesker what he had coming to him. And so I I think 5 is definitely they're definitely going to remake 5. I would wager that they're gonna remake it and then they're gonna do Veronica, because 6 is still it, it's still pretty good looking. It's not a story wise, it's kind of all over the place, and I can't judge because I haven't played it. I played Leon's section of it like halfway through, and that's about it. So I'm not going to go too hard into judging RE6. Let's just say the mass consensus is that it never happened. It was that poorly received. I digress. Right here we have a nice little Easter egg that is, in my opinion, heavily hinting that the next title will in fact be RE5 remake, and I welcome it. I would look forward to playing it. Chris, he hasn't really gotten the limelight in these super nice remakes. He's been in 7 and 8, but I would argue 7 and 8, he's painted as more of like an anti-hero, and or just he's not really fleshed out enough. So if you're just getting this series with 7 and 8, you know, you have no fucking clue really what the fuck is going on with this guy. You just see some major Chad guy come in at the end, have no idea the significance of him, and then you get to play as him for a portion randomly, and it just series long fan understands. A new fan probably wouldn't have very much of a clue what's going on, and if they did, they wouldn't necessarily have that much of a connection to what's going on. But that aside, Chris is probably my favorite like male character in the series. Leon's badass. Leon's really fucking badass. But I think I like Chris more. That's just how it is. Um, it was a little goofy, but still in the best-selling RE titles. A remake 5 could top this if done right. No, absolutely, absolutely, it could. Because I would say that this game had more tedium in its like story design than RE5 did. RE5 literally had a good like pacing. A lot of like these sections came down to more of like, just kill everything rather than like, okay, we're gonna force you to kill things this way, which is how RE4 went about it. It's like you had these sections where you're trapped and you got to go through and kill these things in a certain, I want to say a certain order, but like a certain way you had to go about killing stuff. And like there's puzzle fights that don't really lead to you fighting the person as much as just solving the puzzle to complete the fight. RE5, from what I can remember, it was more just like kill all these enemies, get from point A to point B, boss fight, point A to point, or points B to point C, boss fight. There's plenty of puzzles, but they did dial it back a lot with the puzzles. So it was just more of an action horror game. And if they give it this treatment, it would just be a straight up fucking horror game. And I think that would be fucking phenomenal, personally. I want to see Chris's model and his voice actor. I like the idea of the game of guns. I like the idea of the guns and the ruins in RE5. There were a few puzzles, but nothing really RE style. Yeah, they definitely dumbed it down. I think if they did it this way, they could add more puzzles to it, give it like the whole RE remake treatment. I would love to see the RE 7 and 8 Chris as that Chris. You know what I'm saying? Because if you played the original and then you see Chris in 7 and 8, that's a different Chris, man. That is a completely different Chris. Granted, they're still both, you know, badass Chads. 5 seemed like a fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator clone. And then 7 seemed more of just like a macho commando kind of guy, which to people I can understand that sounds like the exact same thing, but trust me, it's not. There is a distinct difference. Again, I'm getting way too bogged down in the speculation here. We're gonna continue with the scene and then get to the actual my thoughts.
Just one question. What are you planning to do with this?
I do not pay you to ask questions. All you need to know is a new dawn is breaking.
Because it's morning.
Will give their lives so that just one may live.
Gotta say though, Wesker's got that drip.
Expediting that change.
So, we're talking millions of casualties.
Good fucking god, they did such a good design with Ada's character.
How ambitious.
She is fucking hot. 6 billion cries of agony will birth a new balance. Yeah, I don't think I'd quite buy that, Wesker. It's actually a Leon. Imagine you're Leon, you look up and you see the helicopter and you're like, oh, she's gonna give us a ride. Oh, and another reason I think that they're hinting towards, well, I'm not hinting, I think that there definitely is going to be a DLC with Ada and the mercenaries is because the last line he says in this game is that I think this is, or I think you know this is where we both go our separate ways, which is the title of Ada's story campaign. But anyways, my thoughts on RE4 Remake. It was a fantastic time. This is unequivocally my favorite Resident Evil game to date. I have a lot of fondness for Resident Evil Dead Aim. It was a like spin-off title for the PS2. It might have come out on other consoles, but I played it on PS2, and it was a really weird kind of unique game in that the game played third person, but when you did the aiming, it jumped to first person for every gun, not just a couple. And it's kind of funny because the game box says it takes place on a cruise ship, which the vast majority of it does, but then like the last third of the game is a oceanic military base. The final boss is really cool too, kind of like a set piece boss, but still cool. But I really did enjoy this remake, as I have all of the others so far. I think Capcom is just knocking it out of the park with these games, and quite honestly, they're helping set a standard that all video games, especially AAA titles, should be meeting nowadays. It does kind of piss me off that they didn't release at least Mercenaries mode with this thing. They're going to use it as basically like another cash grab later on. And I mean, I'm okay with it in that it'll give us some RE content to chew on until the next big game comes, but it kind of pisses me off that we still have to wait to play that, because Mercenaries mode in RE4 was the fucking best. I fucking loved it. It was so much fun. Oh, okay. I haven't even seen that. Mercenaries mode is coming out April 7th. Fuck yeah. But is it paid? Do I have to buy it? That's the thing. Dead Aim looked fun as shit. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. Dead Aim was fucking awesome. And it has probably my favorite oh shit moments in the series. And I'll just give you spoilers. I'm not going to go too deep because it'll still surprise you when it happens. But basically, there's a gun in a very, very cramped, small room. And this is your first time getting the gun. Once you pick up the gun, something I failed to mention is that the entire floor of the room is covered with zombies. They're all dead. As soon as you pick up the gun, they're all not dead anymore. And I quite literally just like screamed in real life, and I was just like, ah! And I just unloaded the fucking gun into all of them. I fucking freaked because again, it's close quarters. There's not like, you can't just bottleneck them down and shoot them as they come. Like they're literally, one stands up like right in front of you as soon as you pick up the gun. So you just have to like, oh shit. But I digress. So if 7 or Mercenaries is coming out on the 7th, that's good for them. Still should have been at launch. Should have been at launch. I'm just gonna say it should have been at launch. Period. If I have to pay for it, that's gonna fucking suck dick. Not gonna lie. I'm gonna be pretty grumpy about that, especially if they end up making you pay for that and Ada's DLC. It's bullshit. I gave them fucking $60, $70 of my goddamn money to play the RE4 remake, yet they only remade like 75% of it. What the fuck? I digress. Excellent fucking remake, all the same. The story is better. They embellished on the lore. I had no idea Luis was as like integral or oh my god, important to the whole overarching narrative of RE4 as he ended up being. And furthermore, I was actually convinced some of the lore I was finding was about Ramon, but it wasn't. It was actually about Luis. Luis, semi-spoilers here, grew up in this village. I had no idea about that. I thought it was really fucking cool, and it really puts some stuff into perspective that he's not just some random researcher here that happens to be, you know, ex-Umbrella. He actually has like ties to the whole thing way before the game even started. So I thought that was really well done. I liked seeing Ada. That's great. It's nice. Need more of her. She honestly needs her own game, like straight up like her own full-fledged title, not just like a DLC story. Though it was kind of chunky from what I remember. It's still like I want her to have her own full-fledged Resident Evil title. Capcom's no stranger to making, you know, feminine leads, and I mean, she does have her own DLC title, so yeah. And then what would also be cool is if they took the remake treatment and gave us Dark Chronicle as well for like another DLC for this. Since it was a rail shooter for the Wii, can understand the limitations with that, but if they kind of just chopped it up a little bit, I think it would work out pretty well for just a DLC add-on for RE4 remake. And it would also kind of help flesh out some stuff, because even the way they presented Krauser in the remake, which was way better than the original, he still kind of comes out of nowhere, and it's just like, who's this guy now? You can find some lore stuff in the background, not the background, but in the game you can find some lore stuff, some files and whatnot that do kind of dive into his background, especially right before his boss fight. However, it does just still seem kind of weird, and there are still some questions left to be asked, or left to be answered. And it almost seems like they retcon stuff, because spoilers for a different game, but in Dark Chronicle, it's Leon and Krauser most of the time going through this. In this game, you find a report on the incident, and Leon is not mentioned in it at all. Granted, he is a government agent on this mission, and it was like he was never there at all, so we can kind of go from there that maybe that's why he wasn't added. This is like my third time seeing this scene. Yeah, I still don't see what was on about that. Yeah, I got a B rating. That's what happens when I get myself killed just to have a more efficient playthrough. See, Mercenaries will have 8 playable characters, and it's free. Leon, Ada, Krauser, Wesker, Hunk, Luis, Leon's pinstripe suit, Nathan's butterfly outfit. Hell yeah. One second. what was I about to say? I was gonna say I would expect them to do Ada's butterfly outfit as a like DLC costume for this game, like if you can unlock it. And they might have done that. I haven't gotten that far. I haven't done well enough to know if that's an outfit that's unlocked or not. Um, but going back to it, sorry, concerned the DLC is free. I think Arya Revelations 3 should have Jill, Rebecca, and Ada. Boo, you suck. Nah, JK. Oh, hey, fuck. I didn't even think about that. I forgot that Revelations is even a thing. I never played them. I thought they were just some random spin-off game, so I never touched them. And lo and behold, like a year ago, I found this like a nice lore video that kind of went through the entire timeline of all the Resident Evil games. And that's when I found that Resident Evil Revelations probably has the most important stories of the games that kind of bridge the gap from, you know, how do I don't know what the term is for them, but basically all the titles from 6 or like through 6 to 7. So all the titles up until 7 have like this their own narrative, and then 7 sort of restarts it, or I wouldn't say restarts it, but starts a new narrative, because 7 essentially was almost a reboot for the series. And so they kind of took a new story approach. It is still a continuation of the story, but Revelations really tied a nice little bow on the story that 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and 6 were all telling. And I would love to see a Revelations 3 lead into possibly things in between 7 and 8, or maybe even 8 and 9. Who knows? Um, no, there's no outfit for Ada. Yeah, they really helped tie in the events. Sucks. But I gotta say, I like Ada's outfit in this now better than her dress. Straight up. Fucking phenomenal. I know I'm all over the place with my review here. It's probably gonna be my messiest one, but just bear with me. We'll try to get to the real meat and potatoes here. It's really more of a discussion of my thoughts on Resident Evil as a series more than this game in particular. But as I do have somebody waiting to play another game with me, we are gonna kind of wrap this up. I keep talking with my hands. I don't know why. In short, they did an amazing job. I really have hardly anything I can critique about this because I really appreciate a lot of the liberties that they took compared to the original. I really enjoyed the way they fleshed out the story in ways that they didn't in the original. I also like that they kept value to the original in that there's lore files, there's narrative elements in the original that are still true. However, they're not in this game. Like, for instance, finding the fossils of Las Plagas, or whatever the fuck they're calling the bugs and stuff in the mine. You don't actually see them in the remake, but you do see them in the original, and that lore that it was implying is still there. That it's still factual. It wasn't retconned out. It wasn't really changed or anything. So, playing the original still does have some value into helping you understand the whole overarching narrative, and I think that's really important for people like me, especially that want to just know every fucking detail about every fucking thing in all the games. And so I just think that was tastefully done, in my opinion. I really like the subtle changes to the combat, especially the parrying. Maybe the not so subtle change, but the parrying aspect is fucking awesome. I think Leon needs a dedicated dodge roll rather than a prompt only, because there's a couple times where I would have really appreciated being able to like Dark Souls roll out of the way of some stuff or just through some things. Um, let's see. Had Italian lately? No, but I did have chili. It's not Italian at all. I don't know why I brought that up. That's just what I had for dinner today. But so I like the way they did the combat. I like the narrative liberties they took. The graphics are fucking incredible. These games look so good, and their attention to detail is spectacular. The way bullets impact the enemies, the way that though there are duplicate enemy types, there's such a variety that you never find yourself really sitting there, aside from the guys in the robes, but that's kind of obvious because they're wearing a uniform more or less. You're never really sitting there looking at the same enemy coming at you, but there's like five of them. They if there are in the same like bit enemies that are very similar, there might be a couple subtle changes to them, like a different color shirt or scarf. The helmet might be a different color. They just might not have a helmet on. Stuff like that. They took the time to make it feel not so like samey, which is, well, when you're playing these games relentlessly, that helps a lot. Um, the other thing I also really liked was the additions just to the game itself, the way they fleshed out some portions of the game compared to the original. Like a good example is the lake. All the little extra bits around the lake were really cool. It helped kind of pad out the game in a not tedious way. It offers the player more if they want it, but if you just want to follow the narrative, you're totally able to do that too. And they did it in also a way that you're not required to do the side content in order to be able to complete the game. Some games nowadays, they are kind of like that. If you don't do the side content that they offer, you're going to struggle getting through just the main content alone. This game is not like that. You can just follow the story, skip all the extra stuff, skip all the requests, just do your own thing. You're Gucci. You don't need to worry about none of that. But for me, bit of a completionist, it took me 20 hours. I would say a good 2 to 3 of those hours were just spent talking to people. So let's say like my playthrough was about 18 hours, give or take. And also just being paused and like doing stuff in the background. I really, really hope that they continue with this momentum. I'd like to see Capcom bring this level of detail and remake a couple other titles. I would really like to see a Devil May Cry remake. They go back and do the original Devil May Cry, but give it the Devil May Cry 5 treatment. Give it like maybe a couple different styles, possibly. I'm sure they'll change the story, but I want them to do it like they did with this, where they just flesh it out rather than outright just change it. Dino Crisis would be another one. You just see you're on the same page as me. But I'm also convinced that Dino Crisis is coming. I don't even think that's like a wish at this point. I think it's just a matter of time. I think they may have started on it and then it evolved into the what's it, Exo Primal that's coming out right now. And then it might have not have been a remake. It might have been like a further on sequel to Dino Crisis. And then they realized that these remakes are really where the bread and butter's at. So they decided to scrap it, not get rid of it entirely. They convert it into Exo Primal. And then they're going to turn around and give us a full-blown Dino Crisis 1 and maybe 2 remake. Because I have never played those games more than like 5 minutes on one of them. But they do get kind of crazy between 2 and 3. Without getting into heavy spoilers, there's a lot of weird sci-fi spacey technology shit that gets involved that you were not necessarily expecting, especially given the first game. I digress. At least a remake of 1 would be fucking spectacular. And yeah, a Revelations 3 would be fucking phenomenal, especially if they focus on Ada. Please give us more Ada. She's the most slept on character in the fucking series. I already thought she was cool back in the day, and I was like, what the hell is up with this bitch? I need to know more. And this remake has only made that fondness grow. So, ultimately, my thoughts are, if you haven't played it, you absolutely should. If you haven't played any of the other Resident Evils, to be quite honest, you don't need to. You can play this and enjoy it and have a good time and still get a good little bit of, information and lore out of it. But there is a significance to having played the prior titles, at least Resident Evil 2 before this, because you really do get a sense of Leon's character growth. And I think that would just add to the experience of playing this. So if you haven't, I would say play Resident Evil 2 and then Resident Evil 4 Remake. You don't have to play 3 if you don't want to. It doesn't really make or break much aside from the original Resident Evil 3 does mention the European laboratories, and that's really about it. So that's all it kind of sets up for 4. But still, these games need to be played by everybody. New fans, old fans, if you never played it, you should definitely give this a try. Especially because just the amount of fun, like the combat is just awesome. Like I can't wait to play Mercenaries because you don't have to worry about none of the other stuff. You can just go for it. It's not that scary either, so you're not really too worried about being jumped. Well, I mean, you do get jumped, but you're not like worried about like jump scares and all this crazy like tension and stuff. It's just you got waves of enemies coming, and you got tons of ammo to take care of them. If I was to give this like a number rating out of 10, me personally, I do this too often, but 10 out of 10. I fucking loved it. I was hooked on it. I know life this game essentially. I think it's fucking great. I went super hard into the lore. I'm gonna probably watch more lore videos after this. I'm gonna consume everything I can outside and inside of this game. 10 out of 10. Overall, a more baseline, just kind of generalized review, I would say this is probably like a 9 out of 10. And I only say or knock it down a peg because some of the storytelling is a little vague, and at times, if you don't know, the universe lore, it's gonna kind of hit you like, what the fuck, a few times. And then there are some interesting difficulty spikes, I would say, in that some of the set piece fights, one of the heads for the statue is a good example of how insanely fucking difficult this game can be at times. The cabin is another good one, especially on professional, like you were talking about. It definitely had some weird difficulty spikes that I think could have been ironed out a little bit better. And some of the mechanics weren't necessarily fleshed out all that well, or I shouldn't say fleshed out, but they weren't explained all that well. So it's kind of hard to lean into certain builds or tactics because there's nothing really explaining how to make the most of them. And though that's more of like a personal critique, I can see where, like, say a Dark Souls player's never touched like a Resident Evil game before. He comes in, he's like, okay, I'm gonna try to run with this gun and that gun and make the most out of them and save everything else for later or second playthrough. And I can see where they would start to have some irritations and lack of understanding when it comes to employing certain tactics. Like, for instance, the critical hits. I didn't even realize that was really a thing. I'm just like, why the fuck is this guy dying from one bicycle kick that I just happened to get him in collateral damage when I was actually attacking this guy, and I hadn't hit him once before? Well, critical hits are a thing. The game doesn't actually ever really tell you about critical hits, if I'm not mistaken. I could be, but I looked into it pretty detailed. I don't think there's ever really a mention of critical hits being a thing. And then I also like that you can sort of have builds. Now, this is kind of ripping off of the moist meter for Resident Evil 4. But it is something that I was already playing into before I even watched that video. And I do think it is very relevant that you do sort of have the ability to have kind of your own build in this game. And that is, with the weapons you use, the upgrades you get, and the charms slash cases that you use, they can all sort of really play into the kind of gameplay that you go for. And I think that's really cool. I think that does bring or add to the replayability that this game already has. So to reiterate, I definitely think everybody should play it. Personally, I give it a 10 out of 10. It's now, without a doubt, my favorite Resident Evil game to date. And A generalized 9 out of 10. I think if you never played any of these games, you don't know much about Resident Evil as a series, I still think this game is going to hit you just right in the fucking face. It's going to blow your socks off. It's going to really impress you and be like, oh, I need more of this. How can I get more of it? And lucky for you, there's still two whole other games that are at this level of quality that are arguably just as enjoyable that do tie into this so you can really consume more and more Resident Evil content. Now, with that being said, go play Resident Evil. I hope you enjoy it. Those are my thoughts.